You ever have one of those moments in life where you look around at the crowd, the lights, the sound of people cheering and you feel completely, utterly alone? I have. My name's Zoe Jenkins. I'm 26 years old. I'm a content creator, mostly lifestyle and mental wellness. I help people feel less alone online, which is kind of ironic considering how alone I've felt in real life. You probably wouldn't know it from my channel. On camera, I'm confident, clear-spoken, even funny when I need to be. But off camera, it's quieter. It always has been. Especially when it comes to my family. There's a kind of silence that isn't peaceful. It's heavy. It fills up rooms. It walks into family dinners and pulls out the chair next to you and just sits there. And the thing is, no one else even notices it but you. I grew up in Charlotte, North Carolina. Suburbs, big lawn, white picket fence, golden retriever named Benny, picture perfect. Except the picture was always missing one thing: me. My mom, Ellen, is a practical woman. High-functioning, emotionally distant, the type who sends money before she says, "I love you." My dad, David, left when I was 7. I saw him once a year until I was 15, then never again. I stopped asking questions. When I was 10, Mom married Richard. Richard had 2 kids from a previous marriage, Amanda and Blake. Amanda's a year older than me, always ahead, always louder. Blake's 2 years younger, quiet but sharp, the kind of kid who could insult you with a compliment. We became a family. Technically. Mom said we were blending. Like families were smoothies or something, but I felt more like the ingredient nobody asked for. It's hard to explain. They didn't hate me. They didn't hit me. There was no dramatic abuse. No shouting matches, no bruises, just 1,000 little slights. Missed birthdays. Forgotten school events. Dinner conversations that flowed right around me. Compliments that never landed. Zoe's quiet, Mom would say, like it was a flaw. Zoe's off in her own world, Amanda would joke, laughing with Blake. And Richard? He just wouldn't look at me when he talked. Or worse, he'd sigh. Like I was something he had to tolerate because I came with the package. So I learned to disappear. But I also learned to create. When I was 16, I started a blog. It was just a diary at first. Then it became something more: articles, tips, mental health resources. I wrote about feeling invisible in your own home, about how to rebuild your sense of self when your family tears it down without even noticing. People responded. Strangers from across the country. Zoe, this is me. Zoe, you put it into words. Zoe, thank you. So I kept going. By the time I was 22, I was running a YouTube channel with over 200,000 followers. Not viral famous, but enough to pay my bills. I was living in a tiny studio apartment with water stains on the ceiling and terrible Wi-Fi, but it was mine. I was building a life. My life. And I thought maybe, just maybe, if I became someone worth watching, someone worth listening to, maybe they'd finally see me. Spoiler. They didn't. Every achievement was met with silence. Or worse, polite nods. Oh, you make videos, right? That's interesting. It's nice you have something to do with your time. When Amanda got her MBA, the whole family flew to Boston. Facebook albums, group pictures, custom cakes. When I hit 500,000 subscribers, I got a thumbs up emoji from my mom. Literally, just that, .com. Still, I kept hoping. I guess that's the cruelest part of growing up in a family like mine. You learn not to expect anything, but the hope never dies. So when I finally graduated from college, yes, while working full-time, I invited them. I sent invitations. I called. I even made a little video invite. I told them how much it would mean to me. And they said they'd come. I believed them. God, I believed them. I rented a cap and gown. Practiced my speech. Made sure I wore something that looked good on camera just in case they wanted pictures. I reserved 4 seats. I kept scanning the rows before the ceremony started, expecting to see Amanda's curls, Blake's crooked smile, Richard in his suit, Mom with her phone out recording me. But they didn't come. No call. No text. Just empty chairs. I stood on that stage, clutching my diploma like it was an apology I never got. And I smiled. For the cameras. For the strangers clapping. For the world. But inside, I broke. That night, I did something I never thought I'd do. Something dramatic. Something they couldn't ignore. I rented the entire stadium for one night, just for me. I set up a single folding chair in the middle of the field, played a video of my speech on the Jumbotron, ordered the same cupcakes I'd bought for them, and then I sent them the bill. Not because I needed the money. Because I needed them to know what it costs to be forgotten. This is the story of how I stopped asking for their approval and made damn sure they never forgot my name again. It started with a notificación ping, soft and innocent, just like any other message. I was standing in line at the coffee shop near my apartment, mindlessly flipping through my phone while waiting for my oat milk latte, when I saw it. A screenshot from Amanda, sent to me by mistake. Or maybe the universe just finally got tired of watching me play the fool. The message popped up in the family group chat, the one I was almost never active in. Not because I didn't care, but because it was always them talking. Amanda and Blake planning dinners, Richard suggesting golf outings, Mom sending photos from their lake house. I was barely a footnote in my own family thread, a silent recipient of their bond. But that day, Amanda sent something that she clearly meant to send somewhere else. It was a picture. My invitation to graduation. My proud little animated video with bright colors and cheerful music and me at the end, saying, "I'd love to see you there, it would mean the world to me." End of section. And right below it, her caption. "Can you believe this girl still expects us to show up for her, Morty?" I froze. My thumb hovered over the screen as the breath drained out of me. For a second, I thought maybe I was seeing it wrong. That my mind was playing tricks. But then Mom replied with a single word. Yikes. Richard followed up with, "Maybe if she stopped making everything about her, we'd actually want to go." Ah. And then Blake, the one I thought might still have a sliver of decency left in him, responded with a meme. One of those mocking, eye-rolling ones. No words. Just a picture of someone fake crying, captioned, "She's doing the most." I remember standing there, coffee forgotten, feet planted on that cafe tile floor like they'd fused to the earth, reading their messages again and again until the screen dimmed. I didn't cry, not right away. That came later, when I was sitting alone in my car, watching families walk past with toddlers and strollers and laughing parents, wondering how love could be handed out so freely in some homes and hoarded like gold in others. I had always known they didn't understand me. I had always felt their distance, the way people feel a draft in a closed room. They don't see where it's coming from, but they know it's there, brushing against their skin. But this was different. This was concrete. Proof. Cold words on a screen that said, "You're not one of us, and you never have been." I should have said something. Should have texted back, demanded an explanation, confronted them in that moment. But I didn't. I couldn't. Because you can't argue with a wound that deep. You can only sit with it, let it throb, and wonder what kind of person you must be to deserve it. Instead, I did what I always do. I tried to justify it. Maybe they were just joking. Maybe they were stressed. Maybe they didn't mean it the way it sounded. But even as I made excuses, I felt the old ache rising like a wave that had been waiting to crash since I was 10 years old, and overheard Richard telling Mom, "She's just not as easy as Amanda." I went home that night and watched the video again. The graduation invite I'd made. I watched myself smile at the end, hopeful, sincere, still foolish enough to believe they might show up for me. I looked so young. So naive. And I hated her for it, I mean. That version of me who still begged for scraps of affection. Who still thought that one more achievement might be the key that unlocked their hearts. I didn't eat dinner. I didn't turn on the lights. I sat on the edge of my bed, phone in hand, as darkness folded around me, wrapping itself like a blanket of silence. Not the peaceful kind, but the kind that presses down on your chest until you forget how to breathe without it hurting. The next day, Amanda texted me directly. Amanda. Hey, sorry, meant that for another chat. No apology. No remorse. Just an acknowledgement of the mistake, like it was a typo, like she'd misspelled my name instead of gutting me. I stared at her message, hands shaking, heart pounding in that quiet, seething way that rage sometimes disguises itself as restraint. I didn't reply. I couldn't trust myself to. A few hours later, Mom called. I didn't pick up. She left a voicemail, all forced cheer. Hey honey, saw your invite. That's really nice of you. We're actually going to be out of town that weekend. Amanda has a law school tour in Chicago, so we're making a family trip of it. But we're so proud of you, really. I laughed. Out loud. A short, broken sound. The kind of laugh that comes from deep in the stomach when you've run out of places to put your grief. A family trip. To celebrate her. Again. Always her. I listened to that voicemail 6 times. And then I deleted it. Something cracked in me that week. Not in a way that left me broken, but in a way that made space for truth. I stopped trying to twist myself into shapes that fit their mold. I stopped asking, what's wrong with me, and started asking, what's wrong with them? I thought about sending a message back. About forwarding the chat to Mom and pointing out exactly where the betrayal lay, word for word. I even typed it out once, something sharp and composed. But then I thought, what for? They wouldn't see it. Not really. Not in the way I needed them to. You can't teach empathy to people who've spent their lives convinced they're the main characters. Instead, I started planning. Not for revenge. Not even for justice. For closure. They hadn't just skipped a ceremony. They had skipped me. My whole life. My milestones, my griefs, my growth. And if they couldn't be there when it mattered, then I would show them what that absence really looked like, what it cost. Not in dollars and cents, but in the toll of being ignored. So I made a call to the stadium. I booked it. One night. Just me. And I started planning something they'd never forget. Because sometimes, the only way to make someone hear you is to take away the silence they've wrapped you in and replace it with something too loud to ignore. You don't really notice you're being left out until one day, you walk into a room that should feel like home and realize it never has. That's how it was growing up in our house. The living room smelled like lemon cleaner and the soft hum of cable television. The kitchen always had something baking because my mom loved the idea of being a nurturing homemaker, though she only ever made cookies when Amanda had friends over. Our dining table was long, cherry wood, with 6 seats owned for each of us. Technically, but somehow, mine never truly belonged. It was where I sat, sure, but no one ever looked for me there. No one ever asked how my day had been or whether I liked the spaghetti. They just talked around me like I was background noise, like the ticking of the old wall clock, present, but irrelevant. I think I really started to understand it the Thanksgiving I was 17. It was the year I got my first award at school, a statewide writing competition. First place. I remember the rush of it, the way my teacher smiled when she handed me the certificate, the way my classmates clapped when my name was called. For once, I felt like I'd done something worth being proud of, something that might finally make them see me not as the weird, artsy one, but as someone real, someone valuable. So I brought it home, beaming, practically bouncing through the front door. Hey, look, I said. Walking into the kitchen where Mom was frosting Amanda's birthday cake, a triple chocolate, her favorite. I won the writing contest. She didn't even glance up. That's nice, sweetheart. Wash your hands, we need help setting the table. I remember holding the certificate, still warm from being under my coat, and just standing there. Waiting. Wanting her to look at it, to see me. But Amanda came down the stairs just then in her new dress, and Mom lit up like Christmas, complimenting her hair, asking about the nail salon, handing her the first slice of frosting to taste test. I quietly folded the certificate and slid it into my backpack. That was the first time I cried alone in the bathroom. Not loud, not messy, just soft tears that slipped out like steam. I didn't tell anyone. The holidays became a kind of performance. I learned how to wear the right smile, how to blend into the wallpaper. I'd offer to take pictures so I wouldn't have to be in them. I'd volunteer to wash the dishes just to stay out of the conversation. Amanda would talk about college plans. Blake would share funny stories from school. Richard would grumble about work or praise Amanda's latest SAT score. My mom would laugh, refill their drinks, dote like she was born to love them. And me? I'd sit in silence, occasionally ask to pass the salt. They never hurt me, not the way people think hurt should look. They didn't yell, they didn't insult me directly, they just never looked in my direction when they spoke about things that mattered. I was invisible, but in plain sight. And somehow, that kind of exclusion cuts deeper than open hostility. It's the kind that teaches you not to speak because nothing you say will change the temperature of the room. Once, during spring break, Amanda and Blake went with Richard and my mom to the Outer Banks. I found out because Blake posted a photo on Instagram. The four of them smiling in front of a beach house, captioned, "Family Vibes." I was sitting in my dorm room with a microwave dinner and my laptop, watching the likes roll in. When I texted Mom about it, she said, "Oh, it was just a last-minute thing. You've got your own life now, sweetie." But I didn't. Not really. Not then. I still wanted to belong. I still clung to the hope that one day, someone would call me and say, "Hey, Zoe, we missed you." Or even just ask me what I was working on, what I dreamed of, what made me feel alive. It wasn't just holidays or vacations. It was in the small, everyday moments too. Like the time I got a brand deal for a wellness brand I loved, my first paid campaign. I called Mom, excited, wanting to share, but her voice was distracted. "That's nice, honey. Listen, Amanda's just gotten promoted at her internship. She might be hired full-time. Isn't that amazing?" And it was. For her. Always for her. It became a rhythm I couldn't escape. Every win I had was met with indifference. Every effort ignored. It wasn't that they hated me, it was that they never saw me to begin with. They saw a role-quiet Zoe, self-sufficient Zoe, the one who didn't need much, the one who could handle herself. So they gave me nothing and called it strength. But inside, I was crumbling. There were nights I stared at the ceiling, asking myself what I'd done wrong. What I'd failed to become. Why I wasn't enough. Why love felt like a currency I could never afford, no matter how hard I worked. I began to believe that maybe I was unlovable, fundamentally broken, wired wrong. It's terrifying, that kind of thought, because once it settles in, it grows like mold. Quietly. Relentlessly. And still, I kept trying. Because some part of me believed that maybe if I just achieved one more thing, one more milestone, I'd finally be worthy of the seat they always left empty for me but never pulled out. That's why the graduation hurt so badly. It wasn't just the empty seats, it was the echo of every other time I'd been excluded. It was the culmination of all the birthdays they forgot, the pictures I wasn't in, the calls that never came. It was everything I'd buried coming back like a wave, huge, merciless, and cold. I wasn't angry yet. Not fully. I was just tired. So tired of shrinking myself to fit into a family that never made space for me. Tired of pretending that silence was love, that distance was just how they showed they cared. And that night, after the screenshot, the voicemail, the fake apologies, I stopped pretending. I sat in my bed, stared at my ceiling, and whispered something I hadn't dared say out loud before. I don't think they love me. I think they just tolerate me, and maybe that's even worse. Bye. There's something hollow about being treated like a guest in your own family, as if you're borrowing space instead of belonging, like you're constantly standing just outside the circle, close enough to hear the laughter, but not welcome to join. And for me, that feeling was no longer occasional. It had become the foundation of every family interaction, every visit home, every strained phone call that started with, "Hey, stranger," and ended with me hanging up early because there was nothing left to say. The little slights began to stack, brick by brick, until they formed a wall I couldn't see over anymore, and by the time I was in my early 20s, I wasn't just distant from my family, I was being phased out. Quietly. Deliberately. Like I was a chapter they'd outgrown. It started with the house. Mom and Richard had decided to downsize after Amanda and Blake moved out. I'd only been gone for a year, still coming home on weekends sometimes when work allowed, still keeping a few books on the shelf in what had always been my room. One day, I came by unannounced because I was in the neighborhood only to find Amanda's SUV in the driveway and a moving truck behind it. Confused, I walked in and saw strangers packing up the living room. Mom, mid-conversation with a realtor, looked surprised to see me. "Zoe?" she said, blinking. "Oh, you didn't get the message?" I hadn't. There was no message. There was no warning. My childhood home was being sold, and nobody thought I needed to know. I stood there, stunned, watching Amanda give instructions about which furniture she wanted to take to her new apartment, and Mom just smiled like it was all normal. Like it didn't matter that I still had clothes in the closet, or journals in the desk drawer, or 1,000 memories pressed into those walls like dried flowers between pages. Later, when I asked about it when I finally found my voice through the disbelief, she said, "You're not a kid anymore, Zoe. We figured you'd understand." Understand what? That I was the only one they didn't bother calling? Amanda got the dresser. Blake got the PS4. Richard kept the dining set. Me? I got a shoebox of old photos and a message saying, "If there's anything else you want, come by before Friday." I didn't go. Then came the trust. Richard's mother, me step-grandmother, technically passed away in the winter of 2022. She wasn't especially close to me, but she always sent cards on my birthday, and once gave me a necklace that had belonged to her mother, which I wore during tough filming days when I needed to feel grounded. After she died, I called to offer condolences. Richard was brief, awkward, not cruel but distant. "Thanks," he said. "We're handling the estate. Nothing for you to worry about." I didn't worry, not at first. I wasn't expecting anything. But then Amanda posted a story, grinning beside a brand new car, captioned, "Grandma Rose, your girl is riding in style." Confused, I messaged her. No reply. I tried Blake. He told me there'd been a small inheritance, that Grandma had left some money to the kids. "To the kids," he said, like I wasn't one of them. I pressed. "Did she leave anything for me?" He replied with a thumbs down emoji and said, "Not my call, ask Richard." Hell. So I did. He told me flatly that I wasn't in the will. That since Grandma Rose had never formally adopted me as a grandchild, she didn't consider me part of the inheritance. I knew it wasn't true. She may not have been legally bound to me, but she had included me in every family gathering, every Christmas, every photo. She'd given me that necklace with trembling hands and whispered, "This was my mother's. Now it's yours." You don't say that to someone you're planning to write out of your legacy. But Richard was unmoved. So was Mom. "Zoe," she said when I brought it up. "It's just money. Why are you making this into a thing?" Because it wasn't about the money. It was about what it meant. It meant they had sat around a table and divided everything up and I hadn't even been mentioned. I wasn't even an afterthought. I was nothing. After that, I started noticing the patterns I'd once excused. Amanda and Blake were invited to every family trip, every birthday dinner for Richard, every brunch at Mom's favorite bistro. I'd find out days later from their social media, scrolling past pictures of champagne glasses clinking, gift bags under the table, someone wearing the exact sweater I once gave Mom but never saw her wear. When I brought it up, the excuses rolled in like fog. It was last minute. "You're always so busy. We didn't think you'd want to come." They were rewriting our family dynamic in real time, replacing me in their memories, editing me out like a typo in a sentence that sounded better without me in it. One day, I got a text from Amanda asking for help editing a video she was working on for her startup. "Since you're good at that stuff," she said. No greeting. No catching up, just a favor. I almost didn't respond. But I did. I told her I was swamped, which was true, but I also told her I didn't appreciate being treated like a tool instead of a sister. She never wrote back. A few weeks later, I saw them all at my cousin Marissa's wedding. I walked in alone, wearing a burgundy dress I'd picked carefully, hoping for once to be noticed. Amanda and Blake were sitting with Mom and Richard at a round table near the front. There was no seat saved for me. No wave, no smile. I spent most of the night at the bar, nursing a cocktail that tasted too sweet and too bitter all at once. I don't remember what song was playing, but I remember watching them laugh, take selfies, toast each other, completely oblivious to the way my heart was crumbling behind every fake smile I gave to strangers. That night, I went home and took down the framed family photo on my wall, the last one we'd ever taken together, 4 years ago, when I still believed I was one of them. I put it face down in a drawer and replaced it with a quote I'd once seen and never fully understood until then. Blood makes you related. Loyalty makes you family. And at that moment, I realized I had neither. There's a particular kind of hunger that comes from being starved of recognition, not for fame or applause or surface-level praise, but for something deeper, something elemental, the kind of validation that says, I see you, you matter, you are worth loving without conditions, and when you grow up without it, you start chasing it in every corner of your life, carving yourself into sharper, better, more polished versions of who you think you need to be. Just so someone might finally turn their head and say, you did good, Zoe, we're proud of you. That kind of hunger defined my 20s. After the trust fund incident, after the wedding where my presence felt more like a glitch than a guest, I made a decision I wasn't going to disappear, not anymore. If they weren't going to invite me into the light, I was going to build my own spotlight. I wasn't going to be the forgotten daughter, the overlooked stepchild, the polite ghost lingering at the edge of every group photo. I was going to become so undeniable that even they would have no choice but to notice. I doubled down on my content creation. I treated my YouTube channel like it was a living, breathing extension of my soul. I shared everything, not just the curated, pretty parts, but the raw moments too. I talked about loneliness, about being the outsider in your own home, about what it felt like to chase achievement like it was a drug because you were never taught that you mattered without earning it. And people listened. They commented, they wrote emails, they told me their own stories, and for the first time in my life, I felt seen. The platform grew faster than I expected. Brands reached out, a podcast followed. I started speaking at virtual panels on authenticity, mental health, and identity. People I had never met were quoting me in Instagram captions, sending me voice notes about how I'd changed the way they saw themselves. It was everything I had ever wanted to be recognized, not for playing a role, but for being exactly who I was. And yet, every time I hit a new milestone, I would still catch myself looking at my phone, wondering if this would be the thing that made them call. Maybe this time they'd say something. Maybe Amanda would send a real message, not a sarcastic meme. Maybe Mom would text me a simple, I'm proud of you. Maybe Richard, stone-faced and cold as he always was, would finally crack and admit I wasn't just some inconvenient reminder of a life he never signed up for. But silence stayed loyal. I remember the first time a brand flew me out to Los Angeles. It was a conference for digital creators. I was one of the keynote panelists. My face was printed on the schedule. They gave me a suite with a view of the ocean and sent champagne to my room. I FaceTimed my best friend Ava, showed her the spread, twirled around the room like a kid at Christmas. Then, that night, I stared at the glassy ocean and thought, why doesn't any of this feel like enough? Because the people I wanted most to share it with didn't care. I sent a photo of the stage to our family group chat. Just one picture. Me standing behind a podium, microphone in hand, my name lit up on the screen behind me. No one replied. Not even a thumbs up. I tried to pretend it didn't matter. I told myself I didn't need their approval. But the truth was, I had spent so long trying to earn it that letting go of that need felt like trying to breathe underwater. My lungs were used to suffocating. Still, I kept going. I started working with nonprofits, lending my platform to mental health initiatives. I led workshops for teenagers, many of whom reminded me of myself, quiet, overlooked, holding on to wounds that no one in their families seemed to notice. I poured myself into them. I became the person I had needed when I was younger. And still, every time I came back home in the rare occasions I did it was like stepping into a parallel reality. Mom would ask me if I was still doing that video thing. Richard would grunt something about real jobs. Amanda, smug as ever, once asked if I ever worried about being too vulnerable online, as if honesty was a weakness and her curated life was the ideal. Blake barely spoke to me anymore. He'd become a shadow, someone I used to share cereal boxes with on Saturday mornings, now reduced to nods at family dinners and short texts that said K or cool when I tried to connect. I began to realize that there were two worlds. The one I had built with intention, with grit, with love. A world where I was seen. And there's a world where I was invisible, unless I was useful or easy or silent. And that world? I didn't belong to it anymore. But it still hurt. Because somewhere inside me, the child version of myself, the one who once stood in the kitchen with her writing award, desperate for someone to care, still wanted to be let in. Still wanted to be chosen. There was one time I nearly cracked. It was the week before graduation. My final project had gone viral. A documentary-style video I produced about generational trauma and emotional estrangement hit over 1 million views. I was invited onto a national morning show to talk about it. I sent the clip to Mom. She replied 3 hours later. "You look tired. Are you getting enough sleep?" That's what she saw. Not the courage it took to tell my truth. Not the power of it. Not the message, not the movement. It was my dark circles that caught her attention. I sat on my couch after that, holding my phone, and I didn't cry. I just felt numb. Because I finally understood what it meant to stop hoping. Not in a bitter, dramatic way. Just in a quiet, exhausted way. The kind of stopping that comes after years of trying, years of climbing a staircase that never ends, only to realize the people at the top never wanted you to make it there anyway. So I let go of the fantasy. And in its place, I built something real. Not for them, not to impress. Not to win a seat at a table they never meant to share. I built it for me. And when graduation came, when the seats were empty, I was no longer surprised. I was just ready to make my absence mean something. It was supposed to be just dinner. A simple Sunday evening at Mom's new house, smaller than the old one, but modern, with polished stone countertops, minimalist decor, and a scent that tried too hard to feel like warmth but landed somewhere between artificial vanilla and quiet resentment. And I had been invited, if you could call it that, via a text from Amanda that read, "Dinner Sunday. Mom wants everyone there. 6 p.m. Try to be on time." Try to be on time. As if I'd ever been the one to make them wait. I hadn't seen most of them in months. Not since graduation. Not since they skipped it and offered nothing more than silence and flat apologies afterward. I'd debated going, told myself I didn't need to show up, but something inside me, part of me that still hadn't completely surrendered the hope of being seen, made me say yes. Maybe I was a masochist. Or maybe I just needed one last confirmation that whatever I felt wasn't in my head. I arrived on time. Of course I did. The door was already ajar when I pulled into the driveway, Amanda's laughter floating from the dining room like a wind chime in the breeze, that light, performative kind of laugh she saved for audiences. And for a moment, standing at the threshold, I considered leaving. Just turning around, getting back in my car, driving away without ever letting them have another piece of me. But I walked in. The dining table was already full. Amanda, seated beside Blake, was pouring wine into Mom's glass. Richard was carving a roast chicken with a smug look of contentment, like the king of a tiny, cold kingdom. There was no seat set for me. "Zoe," Mom said, standing quickly like she hadn't forgotten. "There you are. We weren't sure you'd come." "I said I would," I replied, my voice calm, too calm, the kind of calm that burns at the edges. Amanda didn't look up from her plate. "Well, you're here now. There's an extra chair in the kitchen." I fetched my own chair. No one offered to help. No one moved to make space. I squeezed in at the corner, sitting half off the table, knees pressed awkwardly against the leg of the sideboard. And for 20 minutes, I listened. I listened to them talk about Amanda's new promotion, something in branding, a company I'd never heard of, but apparently so impressive that Richard kept calling her our little executive with a kind of pride I hadn't seen since. Ever. I listened to Blake share a story about his apartment being repainted and how the landlord upgraded his washer and dryer, and everyone laughed like it was the funniest thing in the world. I listened to my mother recount their trip to Chicago and how much fun they had exploring Navy Pier, how Amanda just fit right in at the law school, how they took the boat tour and ate at that deep dish place Richard loved. And I said nothing. Because they never asked. Not how I was. Not how my graduation went. Not how my business was doing. Not even why I'd chosen to rent the stadium, though surely they knew. Surely they had to suspect something after I sent them the invoice, after I made that statement. It was like it never happened. And something in me snapped. I saw the group chat, by the way. I said, so evenly it almost sounded casual. The table fell silent. Not gradual immediately. Like I'd thrown a grenade in the middle of their roast chicken and Chardonnay. Amanda blinked first. What group chat? The one where you sent my graduation invite with that laughing emoji. I replied, lifting my glass but not drinking from it. The one where Mom said yikes. The one where Richard said I make everything about me. Blake coughed. Mom shifted in her chair. Amanda's voice turned sharp. That wasn't meant for you. I know, I said. That's the point. Richard exhaled loudly, that same exasperated sound he'd been making since I was 10. Why are we dredging this up now? Because it happened, I said. Because you made me feel like a fool for inviting you to something important. Because I stood on a stage in front of hundreds of people, and there were 4 empty seats with your names on them. Mom tried to recover. Zoe, honey, we talked about this. No, you talked, I interrupted. You said you were proud. You said it was a scheduling conflict. But you never asked how it felt. You never acknowledged what it meant. You just brushed it aside like you always do. Amanda folded her arms. It wasn't that deep. You always take things so personally. I laughed. Not because it was funny, but because it was absurd, because I'd spent a lifetime trying to be okay with being left out, and now that I was finally saying something, this was the reaction. Blame. Defensiveness. Gaslighting disguised as concern. You're right, I said softly. It's not that deep. It's been happening forever. I turned to my mother, who sat frozen, her mouth pinched, the corners of her eyes heavy with something that looked like shame but still refused to become apology. I don't need a seat at this table anymore, I said. I just needed you to admit you never meant to set one for me in the first place. She looked like she might say something, but she didn't. Amanda picked up her wine and took a sip, as if the conversation was over, like I had just aired a minor inconvenience. Blake glanced at his phone. Richard carved another slice of chicken. And, just like that, they moved on. But I didn't. Because that silence? That cold, deliberate decision not to respond it told me everything I needed to know. They had heard me. They just didn't care. And in that moment, something final inside me gave way, not with a scream, not with a tear, but with the kind of quiet that comes after a long storm when all the damage is done and there's nothing left to do but rebuild from the wreckage. There's a silence that comes after confrontation. Not the kind that offers peace or reflection, but the heavy, aching kind that settles into your bones like cold water, dragging you down inch by inch. And after that night at Mom's table, after every carefully chosen word I spoke was met with shrugs and sideways glances, I drove home with that silence coiled inside me, wrapped around my ribs like something trying to break them from the inside out. The roads were empty, and so was I. I didn't cry right away. I didn't scream or punch the steering wheel. I just drove, hands clenched at 10 and 2, headlights cutting through the dark, watching the world blur past like I didn't belong to any of it. I could still hear Amanda's dismissive voice echoing in my ears, still see the way Mom's eyes had flickered away from mine like the truth was too bright to look at directly. I could still feel the weight of that table pressing against my chest, reminding me again that no matter how loud I spoke, My words would always land on a floor too cold and too clean to hold them. When I got home, I sat in the parking lot for over an hour, the engine off, the inside of my car slowly growing colder, and I stared out the windshield at the flickering porch light across the lot, thinking about how it never went out, how some lights just stayed on because someone remembered to care. Mine stayed off that night. I couldn't bear to turn it on. Couldn't bear to see my reflection in the mirror, the one I usually faced with pride and lipstick and camera-ready focus. I didn't want to see her, the girl who had once believed that maybe love could be earned. Inside, I curled into bed fully dressed, shoes still on, hair still pinned, and I stared at the ceiling until dawn painted a weak streak of gold across the cracked plaster. The sun rose without apology. The birds chirped like nothing had changed. But something had. It felt like grieving a death, except no one had died. Just the hope that they'd ever really be my family. I stopped answering calls. Not that many came. I deleted the group chat, turned off notifications, muted everyone except Ava and my agent. I moved through the days like a ghost in my own life, filming when I had to, smiling with hollow eyes, editing videos with hands that trembled from exhaustion I couldn't explain. My voice on camera still sounded steady, still said things like, "You matter," and "You're not alone," but each time I hit upload, it felt more like I was trying to convince myself than anyone else. The loneliest part wasn't being ignored. It wasn't even being excluded. It was realizing that no one noticed I had withdrawn, not even a little. No one called to ask if I was okay. No one texted to check in. No one said, "You went quiet, are you hurting?" They just went on, as if I'd never been there in the first place. And the world outside? It didn't slow down for grief that didn't have a name. Deadlines kept coming. Emails piled up. Algorithms demanded consistency. The machine I had built with my own hands didn't care that I was falling apart behind the curtain. I remember filming a video about self-worth and then immediately curling into a ball on the bathroom floor, whispering, "I don't want to do this anymore," into the towel clutched against my face because it was the only thing that didn't ask for anything back. I started dreaming of a different life. One where I wasn't always proving myself. One where I didn't have to keep pretending that being strong didn't hurt. I imagined selling everything, moving to a quiet town by the sea, working in a bookstore or a coffee shop, somewhere where no one knew who I was, where I could be small without being invisible. But I didn't go. Not yet. I stayed, because even at my lowest, some part of me refused to surrender to the idea that this absence, this AQ is all I would ever have. I kept going, if only because stopping felt too much like giving up on the version of me who had fought so hard to matter. But the cracks were deep. I stopped brushing my hair some days, skipped meals. I missed a brand meeting and lied about food poisoning. I pulled away from Ava, ignored her texts until she showed up at my door with soup and fury in her eyes, saying, "You don't get to disappear, not from me." She was the only one who cared enough to notice. And when she sat next to me on the couch, held my hand, and said, "You don't have to be okay for me to love you," I broke. Not loud. Just tears, slow and steady, sliding down my face without sobs, the kind that come from a well so deep it doesn't even make a sound when it empties out. I told her everything. About the chat, the table, the roast chicken, the silence. And she listened, really listened, not the way people do when they're waiting to speak, but the way you do when someone you love is showing you the rawest pieces of themselves, and you hold them gently like broken glass. "I don't know what to do anymore," I whispered. "They don't see me. I've done everything, Ava. I've done everything. And it's still not enough." She looked at me, her voice soft and sharp all at once. "Maybe it's not that you're not enough, Zoe. Maybe they're not capable, and you've been trying to get water from a stone." That landed like thunder. Maybe it was true. Maybe they simply weren't capable of loving me the way I needed to be loved. Maybe it wasn't that I failed. Maybe they were never offering what I was asking for. Maybe they didn't see me because they never wanted to. That thought gutted me. But it also gave me clarity. Because if that was true, then I could stop begging. I could stop chasing. I could stop twisting myself into knots just to earn scraps. I could start choosing myself. But before I could let go for good, something happened. Something that changed everything. Something that pulled the curtain back on the family I thought I knew and revealed just how deep the deception really ran. The truth didn't come to me in some dramatic, thunderous way. There was no explosive confrontation, no shouting match, no weeping confession on anyone's part. It came quietly, like most life-altering things. Do just a simple email, subject line. Follow up on Jenkins' estate. At first, I thought it was spam. I was seconds away from deleting it when I saw the name below the sender, Hannah Carlisle, probate attorney. And suddenly, my hands froze over the mouse, and I opened it before I could even think, before I could brace myself for what might be waiting inside. The body of the email was short, professional, too sterile to hold the weight of what it would become. Dear Miss Jenkins, I've been trying to reach your mother regarding your late grandmother Margaret Jenkins' estate. Since I haven't received any response, I wanted to ensure you, as a listed beneficiary, had access to the following documents. Kindly review the attached files and contact me if you have any questions or if your representation is already arranged. Listed beneficiary. I read those two words over and over again, like they were written in a foreign language. My grandmother. My dad's mother. The woman I hadn't seen in over 10 years, who had faded from my life after the divorce, after he vanished. I hadn't even known she passed away. No one told me. No one thought I should know. My heart began pounding with a kind of slow, rising dread as I clicked on the attachment. A 10-page PDF. The legal language was thick, layered in formalities and footnotes, but there, in clean, bold type, under the section Final Beneficiary Designations, was my name. Zoe Ann Jenkins, granddaughter, 33% of remaining estate value, including rights to property located at 228 Stonewood Road. E blinked. Son. A house, a name, a legacy I hadn't even known I still had a claim to. And it got worse or better, depending on how you looked at it. According to the attached correspondence between the attorney and the family representative, Mommy was never informed. The documents had been sent to her months earlier. There had been follow-ups, warnings, requests for signatures, and every single one had been ignored. I called the number at the bottom of the email immediately, breath shaky, trying to sound composed as I introduced myself. Hannah, the attorney, was careful in the way people are when they know they're about to shatter someone's world with the truth. Yes, Miss Jenkins, she said gently, you were left a third of your grandmother's estate. From what I understand, the other 2/3 were designated to your aunt and a cousin, but the property itself, her house, was to be transferred into your name, pending verification. We've been attempting to process it for nearly a year. But I never knew, I said. No one told me. My mother never said anything. There was a pause. Then a soft, I assumed you were estranged. That's how she positioned it. I felt like I'd been punched. I hung up after thanking her and sat in the middle of my living room with my laptop open, the legal will on the screen like a mirror reflecting everything I never knew was missing. I was never estranged. I was erased. They didn't just forget to tell me. They had buried it, hidden it, decided for me what I deserved and what I didn't. I called Ava, voice trembling, told her everything, the words spilling out in one long, breathless monologue, and she didn't say, I'm sorry, or, that's awful, like most people would. She said, Zoe, you need to fight. And I knew she was right. Something inside me snapped back into place that night, not the old Zoe who craved approval, but the version I had become, the woman who had built something from ashes, who had risen from silence again and again. I pulled up every email, every document, every thread of communication I had with my family and began compiling. I contacted Hannah again and told her I wanted to assert my claim fully. I wanted everything in writing. I wanted to see what they'd tried to keep from me. Because this wasn't about money. It was about truth. It was about the fact that they had spent years trying to make me feel small, unwanted, disposable, and now, faced with a legacy they couldn't twist or manipulate, They had decided I didn't deserve it either. But it was mine. And this time, I wasn't going to fade into the background. I drafted an email and sent it to Mom, Amanda, and Richard. Subject line: about Grandma Jenkins' will. It was short, cold, factual. I've spoken with the probate attorney handling Grandma's estate. I am aware of my legal rights and of the property I was supposed to inherit. I also know that this information was deliberately withheld. I've filed a formal notice of claim and will be pursuing full enforcement through legal means. You don't have to respond because this is no longer about conversation. It's about accountability. I stared at the screen after clicking send, my pulse racing, hands still shaking, but with a different kind of energy now, not grief, not fear, but something sharper, something stronger. It wasn't revenge. It was reclamation. I wasn't asking to be loved anymore. I wasn't begging to be understood. I was taking back what they thought I would never fight for, not just the house, not just the inheritance, but myself, my story, my name. And for the first time, I didn't feel like the forgotten girl at the edge of the photo. I felt like the one holding the camera, finally ready to focus. I didn't plan on confronting them in person. It wasn't the kind of thing you rehearse or walk into calmly, like a job interview or a breakup conversation over brunch, but some moments in life pull you in like gravity. And when the truth finally finds its voice inside you, loud and unrelenting, you realize you have no choice but to let it out, no matter how messy, no matter how painful, because holding it in starts to feel like poison. The confrontation happened 2 weeks after I sent the email. 2 weeks of silence. 2 weeks of no reply, no apology, not even a phone call, just avoidance. Like if they ignored it long enough, it would disappear. Like I would disappear. But I was done being the one who shrank to keep the peace. It was Ava who suggested it, half joking, half serious, when we were walking past the cafe near her place, and she said, "They're never going to say it unless you make them." And I knew she was right. I'd spent a lifetime giving them exits, letting them off the hook, writing emotional closure letters in my mind, and forgiving people who had never even asked for it. So I showed up. It was a Sunday, again, because that was their day. Family day. Roast dinner day. The day they performed the charade of closeness like a polished little play behind their perfect white fence. I rang the doorbell with a heart that felt like a drumbeat in my chest, my hands cold but steady. Amanda answered. She looked stunned. "Zoe, what are you doing here?" "I need to talk to everyone. Now." "Now's not really." "Now," I said, and she must have seen something different in my eyes this time. Something less like the girl they used to walk over and more like the woman they didn't see coming, because she stepped aside without arguing. The living room was the same immaculate, overpriced furniture, candles burning for atmosphere, the smell of garlic and rosemary in the air. Blake was on the couch, phone in hand, looking like he couldn't be bothered. Richard was pouring wine. Mom was arranging the silverware. A picture-perfect family scene. And then I walked in and shattered it. "I know about Grandma Jenkins' will," I said without preamble. The words sliced through the room like a blade. "I know she left me the house. I know I'm listed in the legal documents. I know the attorney tried to reach out to you multiple times and you said nothing." Mom froze. Her hand paused over a napkin. Richard looked up slowly. Amanda walked in behind me, face pale. I waited. No one said a word. "You lied," I said, voice rising. "You pretended she never left me anything. You kept the documents, you buried them, you didn't even tell me she died." Richard set the wine bottle down with a loud thud. "We didn't lie, we made a decision." "A decision?" I laughed sharp, bitter. "You made a decision to erase me from my own bloodline. Alders then." Mom stepped forward, her voice trembling. "Zoe, it wasn't like that. You hadn't spoken to your grandmother in years. Because you made it impossible." I snapped. "You never let me see her after Dad left. You cut off that part of my life and acted like it didn't matter. You made me feel like it didn't matter." Amanda, always the one to twist the knife with a smug tone, added, "She barely even remembered you. We were the ones who visited. We were the ones who checked in. Oh, Dick. She remembered enough to put me in her will, I said, turning to her, meeting her eyes without flinching. She remembered enough to leave me something. You just didn't think I deserved it. And then, softer, more wounded than angry, I turned to Mom. Why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you let me grieve her? Why did you hide it from me? She didn't answer right away. Her face cracked not the tears I once would have begged for, but the guilt she'd spent years covering with busyness and selective memory. When she finally spoke, her voice was quiet, almost childlike. I thought it would hurt you more. She didn't really have much to give, and you seemed stable, independent. I didn't want to disrupt your life. My heart broke again, not because of her words, but because of how deeply she still didn't understand. I didn't need the house, I whispered. I needed you to tell me I was part of this family. Richard stepped in, arms crossed, voice cold. You're being dramatic. This isn't some conspiracy. We were trying to protect the estate. Keep things clean. You have your life, Zoe. Why dig this up now? Because it was mine, I said, my voice rising again. Because you made decisions about me without me. Because you didn't get to decide whether I mattered or not. Oh. Blake, who'd been silent all this time, finally spoke, voice low, almost embarrassed. I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know about the will. I believed him. But it didn't change the betrayal. I looked at all of them, their stiff shoulders, their averted eyes, their brittle defensiveness, and I realized something with perfect clarity. They would never admit it. Not really, not fully. They would explain, deflect, defend. They would never say, we failed you. They would never say, you were right to feel forgotten. But I didn't need that anymore. Because I had the truth. And they had to live with what they did. I filed a claim, I said finally. You'll be hearing from the attorney. Don't contact me unless it's through legal channels. This isn't personal anymore, it's business. I turned to leave. And just as I reached the door, Mom's voice cracked behind me. Zoe, wait. I paused, but I didn't turn around. She didn't finish the sentence. Because she didn't know what to say. And I didn't need to hear it. I walked out of that house feeling more powerful than I ever had in my life, not because I had won, not because I had yelled or scared them into silence, but because I had stood in the fire they built for me and didn't burn. Because this time, I didn't back down. Because this time, they didn't get to pretend it never happened. And for once, I didn't carry their silence with me. I left it at the table where it belonged. Some victories don't come with cheers or parades, or happy endings wrapped in bows. They come with papers served, truths revealed. And the quiet satisfaction of knowing the people who tried to erase you now have to sit with the fact that you didn't go away, that you didn't collapse under the weight of their silence. That you found a way to rise without them and made sure they knew it. The legal process moved faster than I expected. Hannah was relentless, meticulous, and cold in the best way. She filed every motion, chased down every document, and sent every communication with a tone that left no room for negotiation. Within weeks, it was confirmed. My grandmother's will was valid, unchallenged, and legally binding. Her house, my house, was mine, and the estate's assets were to be divided according to her final wishes. The property would transfer into my name, and any interference from my mother, Richard, or anyone else would be considered obstruction of probate. I got the official letter on a Thursday afternoon, white envelope, crisp logo, simple wording. Congratulations, Miss Jenkins. You are now the legal heir to 228 Stonewood Road. I sat at my desk, holding the paper with both hands, and something inside me finally exhaled. Not joy exactly, not vengeance, but justice. The kind of justice that tastes like relief after years of swallowing hurt. The kind that doesn't scream or throw punches, it just stands tall and still, letting the truth do the talking. And then I sent the bill. Not for the inheritance. Not for the house. For the stadium. I typed the email with calm hands, attaching the invoice, $14,700 for one night's rental of the auditorium, full staff included. Screens, lights, post-cleaning fees. It was itemized, clean, Professional. Subject line: graduation ceremony, full family absence fee. Since you were unable to attend my actual graduation, I created a private event to celebrate it myself. I've attached the invoice for your share of the experience. This is not a demand for repayment, it's simply a reminder that absence too has a cost. And sometimes, that cost is more than emotional. No need to reply. Just sit with it, as I sat alone that day watching empty seats meant for people who never showed up. I CC'd all of them, no one replied. But I know they read it. Amanda unsent a message on Instagram a few hours later, which said more than words ever could. A week after the deed was finalized, I visited the house. 228 Stonewood Road. I hadn't been there since I was maybe 8, my legs swinging from the kitchen stool as Grandma made peach cobbler and told me stories about my dad when he was small. The neighborhood had changed, but the house hadn't. The red shutters were faded, the porch swing missing one chain, the garden overgrown, but it was still hers. Still ours. I walked through each room slowly, running my fingers along the dusty banisters, brushing cobwebs from the corners of door frames, and with each step, I felt something knitting itself back together inside me. Not because the house was magical or even beautiful, it wasn't, but because it was mine, a piece of family that no one could take from me this time. I stood in the middle of the living room, the light filtering in through sheer curtains, and whispered, "Thank you, Grandma, for remembering me, for seeing me when no one else would." And in that moment, I felt loved. Not by them. Not by the ones who had spent years making me feel invisible, but by someone who had chosen to leave something behind for me, not out of pity or obligation, but out of love, out of memory, out of a quiet understanding that I had always deserved more than I was given. The victory wasn't loud. It was me, standing in that house, alone, and finally not feeling lonely. But it didn't end there. The story made waves. Not viral waves, not front-page scandal, but enough to ripple through the small-town circuit and online creator networks. Someone at a digital media company picked it up after seeing my podcast episode titled, "When Your Family Writes You Out of Their Story, Write Your Own." They asked for an interview. I said yes. I spoke calmly, clearly, with no bitterness in my voice, only truth. I told them about growing up in a house where love was conditional, where silence was the loudest thing in the room. I told them about achieving everything alone, about sending invitations that went unanswered, about renting a stadium because I refused to let my biggest milestone pass in complete solitude. And I told them what I did when I found out they tried to take even more from me and how I took it back. The article was titled, "Forgotten, Not Gone. How One Woman Turned Rejection into Power." I didn't read the comments, but Ava did. And she told me they were filled with people saying, "This is my story too. This gave me the strength to confront my family." I cried reading this. Thank you for reminding me I'm not alone. That was the win. Not the house. Not the settlement. Not the silence I forced them to sit in. It was the people who heard my story and felt less invisible because of it. That's what I wanted all along, not revenge, not validation, but to be seen. And to help others be seen too. The best revenge, it turns out, is not spite. It's freedom. The kind that doesn't need to prove anything anymore. The kind that doesn't knock on locked doors begging to be let in. The kind that builds a new home, one where the light stays on, even when no one else shows up. Peace, when it finally arrived, didn't come as a flood of joy or some grand moment of revelation. It came slowly, in the little, quiet things I had once overlooked. In the stillness of mornings spent sipping coffee on a porch swing I reinstalled myself, in the way the light poured through the windows of my grandmother's house and touched everything like it had been waiting just for me. I moved in 3 months after the court closed the estate. At first, I told myself it was temporary, that I'd fix it up, maybe rent it, maybe sell it, but the longer I stayed, the more it felt like the place was healing me from the inside out. There was something sacred about claiming a space that had been denied to me, something grounding in repainting the walls and watching them change under my brush, as if I were rewriting a history that had always excluded me. I found her letters in the attic, old ones, brittle and yellowing, tied together with a ribbon that had lost its color but not its strength. Most were to my father, but some were addressed to me. They were never sent. They spoke of missing me, of hoping I was happy, of regretting how distance had grown between us. One letter, dated 2 years before her death, simply read, "I hope she knows I loved her, even if no one told her that I did." Ah! I wept over that letter for hours, not because I was sad, but because it confirmed what I had always suspected deep down, that there had been love, quiet and waiting, buried beneath the noise of other people's choices. In that house, I started over. I recorded new episodes of my podcast from the sunroom she used to sew in. I filmed morning routines in her old kitchen, now painted a soft green, the same shade she'd used in one of her quilts. I hung her portrait by the stairs, not out of obligation, but gratitude. I planted a garden in the back just like she had. Tomatoes, wildflowers, mint. Ava helped me dig the beds and laughed when I wore the floppy straw hat I bought at a thrift store. We sat out there most evenings in the spring, wine in hand, barefoot, soft music playing through the open windows. I stopped checking my phone for texts that never came. I stopped measuring my worth by their absence. I stopped waiting for someone to come back and fix what they never cared enough to preserve. And somehow, in letting go of that weight, I found something I had never had before, not forgiveness exactly, but acceptance. Not of them, but of the truth. They weren't going to change. They weren't going to see me. But I didn't need them to. Because I had finally seen myself. There was no dramatic reunion, no apology tour. Just distance, and this time, I let it stay. I didn't fight the silence. I filled it with music, and laughter, and stories from people who had found me through my pain and stayed for my strength. And on the night my channel hit 1 million subscribers, I didn't think about who wasn't there. I thought about that little girl who once stood in the kitchen with a writing award clutched to her chest, hoping someone would clap. And I clapped for her. Loud. With both hands. Alone, but not lonely. Because now, I wasn't just building a life. I was living one. If you had told me years ago when I was 13 and sitting quietly in the backseat while my family laughed without me, or when I was 17 and folding up a writing award that no one asked to see, or even when I stood in a stadium of empty chairs, heart pounding with hope that never arrived, that this story would end. Not with a reunion, but with release, I don't know if I would have believed you. I spent so much of my life trying to fix something I didn't break, trying to earn a kind of love that never came freely, trying to explain my pain to people who had long ago decided it wasn't valid enough to be heard. And for a long time, I thought that made me weak. I thought speaking about it, feeling it, made me needy, dramatic, too sensitive. I thought silence was strength. That if I could just swallow it all, smile through it, work harder, prove more, then maybe I'd finally be accepted into the space I had always been standing on the edge of. But now, I know the truth. Real strength isn't being quiet about your wounds. Real strength is pulling them into the light and saying, "This happened, and I'm still here." I didn't get the mother who checked in without being asked, or the stepfather who chose me as his own, or the siblings who saw me as more than a background character in their story. I didn't get birthday calls or family road trips or framed photos of me on the mantle. But I got something else. I got clarity. I got resilience. I got the rare, bittersweet gift of having to find my worth outside the walls of my family home, and though it was lonely and cruel and undeserved, it forced me to build a foundation from something that couldn't be taken away myself. And from that foundation, I created a voice that reached people who needed to hear it. I created stories that became lifelines. I created community. I created home. I think we all carry some version of this ache, the desire to be loved exactly as we are, without shrinking, without proving, without polishing ourselves up for someone else's comfort. And when that love doesn't come from the people who should have given it freely, we learn to look for it elsewhere. Sometimes we find it in friends, or in mentors, or in strangers who read our words and say, "Me too." And sometimes, if we're lucky, we find it in ourselves. I used to think I had to forgive them to be free. But I don't believe that anymore. Some things don't need to be forgiven to be released. Some things just need to be understood, accepted for what they are, and gently, firmly put down. Because carrying them won't change the past, but letting them go changes everything else. So here's what I know now. I am not the girl they didn't see. I am the woman who refused to disappear. And even if they never understand the damage they did, even if they never look back and realize what they lost when they let me walk away, I know. I know who I am. I know what I'm worth. And I know, deep in my bones, that I didn't just survive what they did, I grew from it. So, if you're reading this, and you felt that same invisible weight, if you've sat at tables where your voice didn't matter, if you've walked through life wondering if you were too much or not enough or somehow both at once, please hear me when I say, you are not alone. You are not unworthy. And your story doesn't have to end where someone else dropped you. Pick it back up. Write a new chapter. Make it loud. Make it yours. Because healing may not erase what they did, but it gives you the power to do what they never did. Choose you. Always, always choose you.